Good Wednesday morning, everybody. This is Grace, and I just got finished doing a video about the renovations for my regular channel. This is just one under it, and I can make a second one. And I'll just put whatever on this one. I just really started doing it actually. But anyway, that whole thing reminded me of a man that I had dated. This was years ago. Basically, that's when I was involved with Stephen. Yeah, when it was a stalker, turned into a stalker. Well, at one point, I should put it this way. After Adam and I divorced, Adam bought this house, and we both moved in it together. And it was like 1 month after. And then I left, while seeing Michael, left for about a year, came back, stayed for, I don't remember how many years, and left again. That was a different situation I'll talk about eventually. And I was gone for about 4.5 years. And during that time was when I was dating Stephen, and I met Stephen before then, but anyway, I left, came back, kept doing that, going to see my mom, staying with her, taking care of her, coming back, and sometimes she came up here with me. And at this point, I was living in I'd just come back and I was living in a suite, like a hotel suite. It was, I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that, but you rent a suite, it has a kitchen and everything. And that's where I was living, and that's the online dating thing. Again, somebody had told me to do this that I knew, and it was pretty bad. Anytime I ever did it was bad. You saw predators, but this was early on. Okay, I had a little coughing and sneezing allergy attack there, but anyway, I don't remember where I left off. But when I was living in that hotel suite, I lived in it more than once because I would go back and forth, and to my mom's and back, But anyway, this time I was by myself, and I was doing the dating thing. And the first man I met, he was a widower, and I met him at a little restaurant that was right there, and oh my goodness, it was the first person, I think, the first man I had met from this one particular dating website. And he sat there in a restaurant that was a family restaurant and was talking really loud, and he was talking about things that, bizarre things, okay, and just, no. And so after that, I waited a little while, then because Stephen was still stalking me, and I met another guy from it, and the guy met me, I don't remember where we actually met, and then he brought me back home, and we went out to eat, and then brought me back to where I was staying, and I saw Stephen. Yes, Stephen was lurking around, and I told the guy, I just told the guy all about him, and this guy had been a former correctional officer, so I told him, what had happened with Stephen, and that I saw Stephen. So he walked me back to where my suite, and yeah, I saw Stephen, and actually Stephen had snuck in and was standing at the door when we were walking down the hall, and the guy said, "I'm going to take care of this for you." And now Stephen was on parole, like I said before in another video, and I'm just freaking out, and so the guy does handle it, and they both basically come inside of this suite, okay, and I'm there, and they're sitting across from the table looking at one another, and oh my goodness, it was like, yeah, I don't know what to think about. That was so long ago, but anyway, so I kind of got interested in this guy, okay. Now there is one thing. When I met Stephen, I've mentioned before that I only met him because I wanted an outdoor activities partner, like go fishing and stuff like that, because I used to when I was young. It hadn't in many years. And so I had chosen Stephen. I know this sounds awful, but because the men that I used to date were always very good looking, okay, very good looking, and Stephen was not. And in my mind, but way back then, I thought, I want to switch from dating men who were very good looking because I wasn't having any luck with that, and to go with a man that was average. But I wasn't wanting to date Steve. Okay, I'm having trouble with allergies, so forgive me. But I had to delete a clip, so I'm not sure what I left out. But anyway, my experience with men who are good looking was mixed. And a lot of people think that people who are very good looking, whether male or female, is that they're very narcissistic. My first experience with one was that he was total opposite because he was tired of women looking at him. He was like Fabio. Anyway, he was tired of women looking at him for just that, and he wanted somebody to love him, not his look. And I actually saw him. I didn't date him, but I actually saw him go through all that. And yeah, so then after that, yeah, I started seeing, a mix. Some of them were, some of them weren't. And in fact, the last man I met, I actually worked with him. I didn't date him, but he was the best looking man I have ever seen in my life. He was my age, and just a few months younger. And he was not. He was more. In fact, he was kind of pretty opposite. He was I'd say an empath. I don't believe in the mystical magic. I don't believe in mystical magic. Well, if anything, even karma, it's just a term I use because it's easier for people to understand. But yeah, he was a total opposite. But anyway, mixed back and forth. Now, Stephen was not good looking, and the guy, Chuck, I think I included that in the last one, that we just call him Chuck. He was not good looking. Stephen and Chuck were both really big men, and I had totally, with Chuck, I wanted to date him, but with Stephen, Stephen wanted to date me. I just wanted an outdoor activity partner. But anyway, I should have taken time off. So between, but Chuck he was originally not from Texas. This is Texas, and I was in Texas, and he was from, I think, North Carolina originally. And he had an attitude, major attitude, and I didn't know that at first. And because of Stephen stalking me, things came up that really I should have just moved from there and moved somewhere else. But Chuck asked me, he knew the situation, and eventually, really fast, he said, "Why don't you just move into my house? I have spare rooms," and on like that. Well, my brain was so messed up from Stephen, and knowing that Chuck had been a correctional officer, my brain it added up to, hey, that was a good idea. It turned out to not be such a good idea. So I'll be right back to tell that. Okay, so Chuck told me, that he has this big house, and he did, and I went and saw it and everything, eventually, and that I could, just rent a room there in his house, and he had 2 extra bedrooms and stuff like that. And like I said, my brain was pretty mixed up. I wasn't taking the time to think, and I was just scared, frightened, because of Stephen. So I moved in, and I didn't have that much stuff because I was living at, I don't know if I must have already done that. Either had my stuff in storage or taken it back to my property that I owned, and which was near my mom's, next door to it actually. And anyway, I didn't have that much stuff with me, so I didn't have that much to pack from a suite, and so I did. So I moved in there. It was enough to fill up a room there, and so I moved in there, and Chuck said that all I would need to do is to buy groceries, and that he would cover the rest. And I thought that was a pretty good idea because it was just he and I, how much groceries is that going to do? And I wasn't working at the time, and he lived in a very different part from where of Dallas Fort Worth area, than where I was living in that suite. So, I was thinking, just the 2 of us is not going to be all that high. Well, little did I know, this guy would make a list, and he'd say, anytime you use anything, if you used it to cook or whatever, he said, buy 2 when you go back to the store. And yeah, it got worse. And he was, the final straw, I was only there for like 3 weeks, okay. The final straw was when he went with me to the grocery store, and I was only there 3 weeks, and I think I'd already spent like $400 or $500. And he wanted to add in all these supplements and stuff into the mix for me to buy, and I told him no, and he just kept pushing, trying to get me to buy all this groceries and everything for him, and it was just, I said, no, I'm not buying that, your supplements and things like that. Anyway, I mean, here I was stuck with my stuff in his house. I should have been thinking, but I wasn't. I was too messed up because of Stephen. So anyway, I eventually, like, he was working and I wasn't. So what I did, I think the next day or something like that, while he was at work, I packed my stuff up and I left. Okay, I left, and I went back to that suite, and of course Stephen was around, and it just continued. Being stalked by Stephen, and I was in that whole pretty messed up mind, and I did the whole thing of thinking, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. It was the worst, probably worst time of my life all around. Actually, I left out some things about Chuck, and I don't know if I put this after the clip that I just ended or before it, so it might be out of order. But Chuck had, I need to mention this. Chuck had an attitude that he wanted to find a woman to live with him, like I was, living in his house, so she could pay the mortgage, and he could use the money that he saved off the mortgage to renovate his house, which is why talking about renovation made me think about that. But and I said, well, what is she going to get in return? He said nothing, and he told me a story about his mother that had lived in, I guess it was North or South Carolina, and she had remarried after a divorce, I guess. And the man, after she died, the man that was her, you know, her boyfriend or whatever at the time, they weren't married, he was still living in the house, and the family got together and said they were going to kick him out. But he had been with her for many years, and he had no place to go, and they were saying that was just too bad. He should have taken care of himself, and so he was kind of proud of that. So then when he told me this story about this whole thing that he wanted somebody, a woman that would live in his house and pay the mortgage, and so he could renovate the house. I said, what did she get in return? He said, just to live here. Like it was some grand place, and it was in a nice area, but it wasn't some grand place, and just his attitude was awful. And so of course, I kind of got a feel of who this man was by that. And he was also another thing that was very curious to me was that he was very homophobic. Like he'd see something on TV about whether it was gay men or lesbian women, and he would make really awful comments. And I'm very open-minded and all, I only date men, always have, and probably always will only date men. I have no interest in women that way. But so it wasn't a personal thing for me. It was just, a difference in views. And he was extremely conservative, and I'm extremely liberal. So just put it that way. So he would say things like that. He'd make comments. But here's the thing. There was something about him that made me think that maybe he was in denial about himself. Because I got the feeling that he was, I guess in his 40s, I got the feeling that he actually liked young men. I'm talking like half his age. Not boys, not that way, but young men. And one night I was there and I came out and saw him sitting in the dark with a really young guy. So, yeah. Now, of course, I know about blaming the victim and that I'm doing that in some sense by saying it was my fault, that I should have been thinking, because really I was in a terrible, terrible situation all around and being stalked by a sociopath, someone who spent most of his life in prison. And I didn't know that at first. Yeah, I was in a pretty bad situation. So I am really, I look back and I say, I know that that's what it was. It wasn't, I shouldn't blame myself. But there is a point where I separate that from, separate it from myself and say that I needed to work on myself, and I did. It took a long while, but finally I did start taking care of myself, because after that I started doing things. After I finally got Stephen out of my life, I started doing things that were just erratic. It was just unbelievable. And then I finally, one time after I did something that was really way too far, I told myself, okay, this is enough. I've got to stop. But it took years, kind of like tapering off in a way. But yeah, there was a moment then, but it wasn't until I'd say about 2 years ago that I finally said I'm not even going to date anymore for a while, and that's 2.5 years ago, I'd say, at least. And before then, for I guess a year, maybe two, even before then, I had really wasn't that interested in it, and the ones that I would meet were predators. Um, you can screen them all you want. People say screen them, screen them, screen them. You can do all that, but a predator knows that somebody's going to be screening them, and they're trying to figure out, this angle, that angle. Now, and they're on their best dating behavior, especially around my age. I'm 53. They're skilled. But anyway, I'm having an allergy attack, so this is enough for this one. I do plan on doing more. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.